In a world yearning for change, there exists a community of visionaries and innovators, united by a common goal: to solve Earth's biggest challenges. From climate action to quality education, we're tackling all 17 Sustainable Development Goals reassembled as 10. We embody sustainability, unity, and empathy. Our character and reliability shine as beacons of hope. As role models for future generations, we're building a world where wisdom and consciousness rise, harmonizing life with nature and all species. Join us. Together, let's create a balanced, sustainable future for all.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live event for Fireside Chat. We're coming live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So thank you, everyone who's joining us. We look forward to engaging. Today, we're going to be speaking about doing good burnout. And we have Dr. Emily Bennett and Angela Nesbitt with us. Surprise! And Christina, who's been here, who's also involved in working with, leaders and supporting them. So I think that the topic today kind of came out of the idea that I've been working in the nonprofit space for a long time, but during COVID, we saw the burnout rates of healthcare professionals, and then working with climate. We started to see some of the challenges that folks who are trying to advocate for climate action and being involved are having their own kind of challenges. And so as we kind of started going through this, and we prepared for our TLL summit next week, so if you haven't registered, register, I realized how much work and effort and passion people put into the work that they do in doing good, whether it's physicians, whether it's climate activists, whether it's NGO professionals, nonprofit professionals. All of this passion that goes into it can lead to a lot of stress, can lead to a lot of, negative kind of feelings, and eventually burnout. And from my perspective, this is actually one of the key challenges that organizations focused on doing good run into. It's almost kind of a resilience challenge. It's an operational challenge. It's an HR challenge, and it's a person challenge. So with that, I wanted to introduce our panel and just have you talk a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll get into some conversation. Let's start with Emily.
Hello, it's so great to be here. This is a topic that I love to speak about. I've got my own burnout story, which I'm sure many of us do. I was really involved in activism and organizing when I was doing my undergraduate degree way back when. I became executive director of a really small organization while I was still doing school. And I was the kind of person who is like staying up until 1 a.m., like writing letters to people and organizing a divestment campaign and preparing to speak at a high school and just really overdoing it. And what happened is I got sick. I became super anxious, had a lot of physical symptoms, and I just was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I abandoned this thing that was extremely important to me, that I dedicated my life to in a big way for many years. And I felt a lot of shame about that. I didn't have a word for it. I felt just failure. And I was like, kind of pocketed that side of me away for some period of time and focused on other things because I was so full of shame that I had failed in my huge mission to like make change in this particular way. Fast forward a year or two, I saw a naturopathic doctor. Naturopathic doctors in Ontario, Canada, where I live. We are regulated, licensed professionals that practice naturopathic medicine. And I saw my first one, and they kind of explained to me what was going on. And they really helped me cope and understand better my symptoms because I was still feeling really unwell. And so I started seeing one. I realized, oh, this is a really powerful system of supporting people. It's focused on root cause and preventative medicine. This is what I wanted. I want to do this. And so I went to school, became a naturopath, and I started seeing people just like me. All my patients were very similar to me, folks who were in community organizing, social workers, educators. And I was so jazzed to help them get through what I had got through by showing them how to take great care of themselves, even when you're so committed to supporting others. However, just at the beginning of 2020, I started to notice a trend where my patients, who were these folks who fit into these kind of roles, came to see me, and we talked through what was going on. And I would realize I would talk them through what they needed to do, set them up with a plan. They would start implementing them, and I would see them 6 weeks later, and they'd come in and say, you know what? Actually, right after we saw each other, I went on stress leave. I realized I just can't do this like while I'm working, and I just need a break to invest in myself. I was like, okay, great. And this happened 3 times, very close to one another. And so it really stood out to me as a trend. So then I would send them off to practice the things we discussed again, see them again 3 months later, and they'd come in and be like, yeah, I'm doing so much better. I just went back to work. You know, things have really improved for me. I'm sleeping. I'm not so anxious. Like all these stress-related symptoms have started to resolve. And then I would set up another meeting with them like another 2 months later to make sure we were still on the right path. And 3 times in a row, I was told, oh, actually, I just gave my notice. I realized my job is the problem. I can't keep up with these ways of caring for myself in this work environment. And so then that sent me on a real, quest to understand this better, to really understand like how work might be a root cause to an individual experience of feeling unwell. I came across the definition for burnout, which was, created by the WHO and added to the ICD-11 in 2019, and realized that what I had experienced, 12 years before was burnout. That, the feelings I had around being emotionally and physically exhausted and unwell, feeling like cynical about all the work that we had done and that it was useless, that we would never do what we intended to do, even though we were working so hard. The progress was so slow. And I realized that was exactly what I had experienced. That's what these people were experiencing. And then, you take a few steps back, and it's not in the international classifications of diseases as an individual medical diagnosis. Burnout is in there as a workplace phenomenon. The workplace is the root cause of burnout. In order for it to be identified as officially burnout and not an experience of stress otherwise, it's work related. And so it's the workplace that needs to change in order for people to sustain recovery and not burn out again. And so that's
insight.
my long story.
Yeah, no, I love that insight, and Christina posted the same thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because we all kind of had a little chat before we went live, and there's just so much to it in terms of like what work can the stress that work can create. And I didn't realize that it was considered a work condition and not a medical. So that's interesting. Angela, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you ended up working in what you're doing?
Okay, so I totally understand why professionals experience frustration, stress, and even burnout. I'm case one. And this desire to change and improve the organization, or else just leave and create a better lifestyle and create their own business. And when I think about when it was my turn, and burnout wasn't even a term that people recognized, I could have done with some clarity producing conversations, because it was a cloudy time in my head, and I would have liked to have those conversations to make even better decisions. And that's how I came to start my business, to help others do the same. And so my clients tend to be highly successful people who are silently suffering burnout. And these are often individuals who think, this is not a privilege that I can exercise the same at burnout. I'm this high flying doctor. I'm at the top of my field. I'm the CEO of the company. This isn't something that I can admit to. And I would say many physicians don't even know what burnout is. And until they recognize that what the symptoms look like, they don't know what to do with it. And so this becomes an issue that I now see is part of, if you're going to be a leader, and my work is to transform leadership. If you are going to be a great leader, you need to create an environment in which you remove this silent suffering and quiet exiting of employees.
Thank you. You bring it to the leader. Emily talked about the company and the organization. I'm definitely starting to see a trend, and I'm glad we're talking about that, because one of the things I was worried about when I started doing some research and support, a lot of it was more about how, as an individual, you can manage stress, how you can kind of de-stress your life, and so forth. And from my perspective, it's always been a little more systemic than an individual problem, because the individual really becomes the symptom, while the systemic pressure and lack of resources and whatever it might be ends up being kind of the root cause. So, Christina,
precisely, and I think, as I say, I mean, we've seen this with physicians who have a very high level of resilience. By most standards of individuals, I'm not talking about the military, very high resilience, and they are suffering burnout. Their suicide rate is double the national average of in North America. So this isn't an individual thing that you just need to do by yourself. It's much more. It's much bigger than that. It's a systemic issue, as you point out, Carlos.
Christina, so I know you've been in leadership and you've worked in some of this, and you've been through some of it yourself. What add to the conversation?
I'm so glad that we are here, two people, let's say, from both sides, and two important aspects, bringing the NGO and this type of work to the equation, and then Angela and I from the high performance leadership CEO type of work, but also as a physician myself, because I finished medical school and I was in hospitals, and so I can relate to both sides, and most of my colleagues are completely burned out today. And it is very interesting because such professionals are so disconnected from the world. They don't know anything about climate issues, anything about what's working outside of their bubble, in a way, because you have so much responsibility, and because everyone sees you as a god. If you're a doctor, people are seeing you as a god. The same with the CEO. And I worked with this category for over 2 decades, and I also experienced firsthand as a serial co-founder. And it's so hard to let go of the roles, because we portray roles in people and we just give them the role. And then the person feels the responsibility to take on that role, and they cannot allow to feel or show weakness, because they are so afraid that the entire mask will fall down and they will be seen as human, because it is attractive to be seen as someone who has the answers for everything. I mean, I was so close, as Angela said. I truly, because of my past also and the background, I truly was close to suicidal CEOs, suicidal high performance people, including athletes and politicians. And I was the only call in such situations, and you don't want to have that. I really hope I won't have that again, but I don't know, because people trust me. And so, because of what was said before, I'm so happy Emily is here, because she has such specific expertise in NGOs that is associated with social workers and people who want to do good for others, and are here for the right causes, but they are seen as inferior, as something that, oh, you are wanting money and you want donations, and you don't, it's like perceived donations, it's perceived like something, it's beneath our needs, and it's something inferior. I think that we could start the process of conversation about the status of good workers and where they are. And although doctors are on top and they are doing good, there are other categories that are also doing good and who don't receive the accolades, but they are thinking about humanity. They are thinking about more than their family or themselves. So they should be on top of things. They should be appreciated. And we should have these open conversations that all of us went through burnout. And because you said, and I want to be transparent with TLL, I said, I have the mission to be as transparent as possible, also as a role model or a leader, or to allow to people to show weaknesses. At some point in my coaching practice, I realized that one of my main roles, and maybe you identify, Emily and Angela, is to just give my clients permission to feel weak and just let go and cry and just bring out the personal stuff that they cannot share with anyone. That's why a coach and a mentor is so crucial for people who are high achievers. It's just like oxygen. And it's what I want to show with the summit. We created a summit. Some are preparing for a year, and with budget and corporation and with very assigned roles. And we did this inside TLL with volunteers, basically, with people, conviction-based people who understand why we are doing this and why we put such a horrendous mission on our head. To create a global summit with 33 speakers around the globe, all top-notch, high-level speakers, and everything to be done professionally in 6 weeks, it's absolutely horrendous. I went through burnout these weeks, and especially the last 3-4 weeks. Angela knows firsthand because she also acted as a coach. She is part of our TLL Inside Advisory Board, and also she's helping us out. And we had some calls exactly on this topic, just to not break completely. And so it was something that I can talk about this part, but also what we can do in tips. But this was my introduction a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you. No, and so let's kind of bring it back to more like a group conversation. So thank you everyone for your stories and kind of coming in. I think that perspectives are really great in terms of understanding some of the root causes, giving permission to people to, let go and to feel okay with, with the work that they're doing, or moving on and doing something else that might be more healthy for them. As we kind of get into this, so we talked a little bit about some of the experiences. What I wanted to kind of get into is, what are some of the things that you can kind of bring to the table in terms of supporting or helping individuals who are doing good? And so we'll start with the individuals, and I kind of mentioned earlier that we always seem to deal with, the symptoms and not the root cause. But I think it is important to give everyone a sense of what some techniques are, or how do you approach an individual who is on the verge of burnout, right? And then we can also then go into more of a systematic, as a leader, or as a someone in charge of a company and personnel and staff. What kind of advice can you give them? So let's start with individuals and some ideas. Emily, let's bring it back to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, especially if we're like in work where the work itself is very centered on service and requires compassion. There's a variety of experiences, of kind of stress-based experiences that a person can have that look like burnout, and we may call it burnout, but may not fit the exact definition. And does that matter? I mean, in some ways it does. If we're trying to get to the root cause, it does matter. But I think it's worthwhile to kind of bring everything up in a conversation like this. So for example, compassion fatigue is an experience that individuals can have in work that is, centered on doing good, and is really centered on needing to bring their most compassionate self to the work that they're doing, probably in service of others in some way. And that is something I'm really into, this idea of, when that is the work at hand, we need to take professional responsibility for that. Like, we should, if you are a social worker, if you're an addictions counselor, if you're a vet technician, if you're a nurse, you come into that work knowing like you inherently are at risk for compassion fatigue because of the work that you're doing. And compassion fatigue is this sense of feeling like the work itself has exhausted you. A person, like, it has exhausted your capacity to remain compassionate, to remain like emotionally attuned and ready to support someone who needs your support. It can be extremely challenging work, and it requires, investment in your own self-care, investment in building your personal resilience, investment in building your capacity for holding boundaries between your work and personal life, so that you can maintain that ability to be compassionate to the people you're working with. And so, workplaces have a role in talking about compassion fatigue and the risk for it, by saying we need to accept that this is an inherent risk for everybody in this role. So we need to be talking about it, so that I can say, hey, I see you struggling. I see you slipping out into like a state of disconnection, maybe not being able to offer your most compassionate kind of support anymore. Like, how can I support you? Do you need me to take on a bit of your client load or something like that? And that compassion fatigue looks like burnout, and it needs to be addressed through like really individual acts of self-care in order to maintain that resilience. Burnout itself, like, I don't want to step aside from this too much, but one thing that I always like to point out, though, is that when we're truly looking at burnout, we're going to see a trend across a profession, across a team, a department, or a workplace where multiple people are experiencing this state of exhaustion, cynicism, inefficacy. And so when we intervene with individual recommendations for well-being, like, hey, let's do yoga, let's do like a yoga class together, let's do a meditation workshop, good things for individual well-being, but maybe missing the mark for what people need may not be the source of the burnout that's happening in a trend across an organization, and can in fact cause more disconnection between employees in the workplace because they feel like, what, at a yoga class, like, we don't need that. We need like whatever the thing they do need is. We need more one-on-one time with our managers. We need whatever it is.
So understanding what the need is part of the process.
Absolutely. Yes. I believe that there's a reason that in medicine and in management, we have specific definitions to identify what's going on. I personally think it's important for us to be sure we know what we're talking about, especially because in my work, I consult with organizations on making management changes in order to decrease burnout, to decrease the chances of a workplace or a team being burnout prone. And so we're talking about frontline workers a lot of the time. I'm not the one supporting leaders directly. I'm supporting leaders by improving the retention on their teams, improving the engagement of their employees. And so we need to know what we're talking about. Are we talking about one team who doesn't realize what is needed in order to maintain their capacity to provide compassionate care? Or are we talking about management issues that are leading to this state of burnout, this state of exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy?
And what are the biggest complaints, if you could just list them? Because I'm very, very interested. You are working with the workers, and what are their complaints?
Right. So a lot of complaints that, in my experience, I hear a lot of complaints centered around communication. In the end, I would say that like a lot of the concerns that come up have to do with management and access to decision-making, understanding how things affect them. People also, actually, if I take even a few steps back, in the research that's been ongoing for the past 25 years on burnout across sectors, countries, languages, we have identified, or not me, but it has been identified that there are 6 organizational risk factors that push people to a state of burnout. Burnout, like I've said a few times, is this experience of having these 3 facets: emotional and physical exhaustion, cynicism or a negative attitude towards the work, and a feeling of professional inefficacy, like it's not even possible to do a good job. And the risk factors that push people to that state, I'm going to list them, okay? There's 6. Workload. Workload is the most impactful. Of course, this includes just having too much work, but it also includes having like inadequate job descriptions or not being clear on what you're responsible for. There's control. How much control and autonomy do people have over how the work is done, about how decisions are made that affect them? There's reward. Do people feel recognized for their good work? Fairness. Are things made, based on merit, or is it about who you know? Community. Are social relationships encouraged in the workplace so that people can get that support from their colleagues? Where are we at? Is that 5? The last one is values. And this comes up a ton in purpose, mission-driven work in the nonprofit space, especially. Are the values that people come in expecting in the organization, do they experience that? Like, are their expectations met when they actually start working there? Or do they feel this mismatch between what the organization says they stand for and what it feels like to work for them? And that can push people to a state of burnout. And so when I'm talking to organizations and assessing what's going on there, I use validated surveys, focus groups, and interviews. And we see, across the spectrum of those organizational risk factors, different things will come up depending, team dependent and organization dependent.
And can you see a linkage between what you noticed in the field between the imposter syndrome and burnout?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, Angela, do you have anything to say to that with respect to leaders?
Yes, I hadn't thought of it that way. I did want to, before answering Christina's question, I wanted to underscore something you said, Emily, about values. And whereas not-for-profits tend to be much clearer on their values, I think I see this trend across the board in organizations that employees are demanding that there be values, that they know what the values
Absolutely.
are. There is, and maybe this is, we can go back at the history lesson of what it meant to be a corporation, maybe 150 years or so ago, that you got to be a corporation if you were very clear on the benefit you were offering society. And if you couldn't maintain that benefit, you lost your license to do business. Now, that was a society in America where the society was important. And I think we're coming back to a time now where people are saying, yeah, I want to work for something that's important.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. People want meaning. It's not enough anymore to just be given a paycheck, good benefits package. They want a relationship with their manager. They want to be sure that they're contributing to something with greater purpose. People want meaning from their work. I certainly agree with you.
Yeah. And to go back to Christina's question about the imposter syndrome, now this is based on the people that I work with. They're not putting their hand up to say this until there's a lot of trust in the relationship before they admit to it. I see that has a lot to do with whether they have their self-leadership and their authenticity, their sense of purpose, and that clarity around who they are and their sense of purpose and why they're here. Because these are often people who have really highly efficient organizations running, and they're able to get people to get things done, but the inside has not been healed and nurtured.
Very good point. I would also want to address maybe a little bit what is burnout, because I had multiple definitions, but one of the most helpful one in my view is to think about it as control. And what does it mean? How much control do you have around the actions you need to pursue? Because this is like in my case and in your case and in leadership cases. Every day we have a basket of to-dos on our list, and that are changed and manageable, and they were chosen by us to evolve. They make us excited because they are part of our journey and our objectives. And then you have another basket that is not under your control. Talking about the summit, emergencies, situations, problems, conflicts, cancellations, and all. Everything out of your control. You have no idea when you wake up in the morning how many of this you will get, how many of this will you get. And when they are in this balance and you have more under your control things, then this is a good thing. But when you get unexpected, uncontrollable things, we as humans, we need control. We need to feel that our lives, it's safe because we can do something about it if it's not. But when you get too many problems on a daily basis that are out of your comfort zone, and they are linked because it's exactly that kind of feeling of dying. When you're out of your comfort zone, when you need to change something, and every human is resistant to change, the same with these tasks. If they are not under your control, you will start to feel overwhelmed. And if that basket is today, it's tomorrow, it's for a week and continues to be, then you can crash and burn completely. So once we consciously think about this, we can have some solutions that I will suggest afterwards, because maybe it's in the last part of this session, but it's a good starting point for us to heal and get the right type of actions and also techniques that can help us deal with such situations.
I love that. I would love to say some things about control, because when it comes to those risk factors for burnout, I have a favorite, and it is control. Because if you think about it, you're so right, Christina. And so then let's think about employees. Let's think about employees who don't manage anyone. Many of them are not, if a person, especially if a person has maybe come like through, they began in frontline work, like in nonprofit work, for example, and at one point they became, promoted into a managing role, and now they're supporting people, perhaps like without a lot of training around management, perhaps like with a lot of expertise in their frontline work, but perhaps not having necessarily done much in the way of training around management. This idea of like ensuring that employees also are aware of what is within their zone of control. Like, do they have the ability to make decisions? What decisions can they make that affect them within their work? And I think that like this is a really undervalued factor that pushes people towards burnout control, even within organizations as well, not just for leaders, but for everybody. So we actually know from the data, workload is the most impactful when it comes to burnout. Like if you want to burn out somebody super fast, you don't give them a break after a big summit. That's one of my tips. Make sure you take a couple of days off after the summit. We also know very clearly that when you have a big event, if you can take some time off after that to recover, it really slows down a progression to burnout if it's already in motion. So, okay, workload, we do that. But let's say it's a circumstance where you're understaffed, there's too much to do with too little time and too few people. You can't do anything about the workload. You've done everything you can. If you can increase control for your employees in whatever way, if you know it's going to make one person's life easier if they can work 7:30 to 3:30 instead of 9 to 5 because they have to pick up their kids, it's going to drastically reduce the chance that that person is going to burn out and require time off work or just quit. Anything that we can do when we can get really clear about how to increase control for people in general on your team, within your workplace, you are going to have a massive impact on burnout. And that's a really kind of fun thing to figure out. I don't know have you heard about what the company that makes Gore-Tex, have you heard about what they do? They have something called the water line. Have you heard of that?
No.
The idea is, I believe it's the water line. The idea is you get really clear about what is above the line and what is below the line. Oh. Everything that above the line is within your ability to make decisions on. And then the things below the line, that's where you seek advice from other people on your team or consult others that it's going to impact. And you can get really clear about that for everybody in an organization, even the person who's doing the most entry-level position. This is what you are allowed to make decisions about on your own. This is what is within your zone of influence, your zone of control. And it really is a powerful, undervalued thing, I think, when it comes to getting in the way of burnout.
Yeah, and
actually,
sorry, carry on, Carlos.
No, go ahead, Angela.
No, I was just going to say, and companies that are very clear on their values and how decisions are to be made can distribute decision-making much wider because people understand. Because there's always going to be situations where no one has thought of, there isn't a rule, if this is a first time, but if somebody understands, well, this is what we believe in, this is how I'm going to make a good decision, and I am not going to be punished for making a decision based on these values, even if for some reason that was the wrong decision, but I used the right criteria, that just gives people so much greater sense of control and efficacy.
Yeah,
and we're getting into some of my favorite part of like systematic, and kind of one of the things that I mentioned when I came into TLL was to be able to empower staff, right? Which is part of that control element. You really need to understand your values and be able to communicate those values so that people can move in the same direction. And then you also need to implement really good delegation techniques, right? And so if you actually have good delegation techniques plus a clear understanding of the values of the organization, then you're giving people a framework for how to engage, and you're letting them know in what direction to engage. And so that allows them to be more empowered and therefore can take ownership, right? And then when you kind of bring all that together and you kind of align people to the cause and to the methodology, they're empowered, they're able to feel safe in a location, which also means creating a safe space to fail, right? And so being able to be supportive of failure. I believe fail small, succeed big, right? Is kind of one of the things I like to say a lot of times, because if you can fire the bullets before you fire your cannonball, and experiment, try different things, find ways to create safe environments like an R&D lab, or an innovation lab or something like that, where you can find and identify. That was one of the things I liked about TLL. Is I'm like, we have some ambitious, audacious goals, and we're just going to keep iterating. Is it going to be perfect? No, but we don't need it to be perfect, because we're going to learn and we're going to move forward. And so that, I think, is one of the things, I think, in terms of control, is you need to have all of these other elements in place to empower, so that they feel control.
And this is exactly connected, because I saw Greg's comment as well about Daniel Pink, and he mentioned that, yes, the 3 parts for motivation: intrinsic motivation, because that's more important for us because it's sustainable. It's basically autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And what we were talking about here with control, it's based on autonomy, because if a person loses the sense, because we are people who are perceiving things, we are emotional, we need to understand that even our intellectual capacity for cognition, it's less when we take decision than the emotional part of it. And so if we have the sensation that we have that control over our lives, our days, that will give us that sense of autonomy, and that will motivate us to do more. When we lose that with too many tasks that are out of our control, eventually we will feel unworthy. We feel that we don't know to do anything. We devalue ourselves, and we become so demotivated that the next step is a huge depression or anxiety or suicide temptation or ideation in our head. And what I am doing here, so I have two ways to deal with it also through my practice. And what I've noticed, I use the buttons of I have mental buttons, and for specific tasks, or when it's too much and I just need to shift, I shift the perspective and the role I'm in. And so in my view, it is a little bit of abstract. It would take more time to explain, but it's just shifting roles. Because if you give direction to your brain, our brains go in direction. If you show for the next hour, I need to be a good leader, it will shift the synapses and the circuitry inside your brain directly. If you say that, okay, for the next hour, I need to be a good manager, then it will do the same. And then when you have the free time, and this is very, very important, if you go out or you have a weekend, or sometimes when I need to relax for a walk, I need to press the button, this is a walk. And during that time, to not think business. It's super, super important to feel okay, to feel bored. I never feel bored, but I do feel connected to the present moment. So when I do those walks, my focus is on the present moment, on the trees, on the sidewalk, on the cars that are passing, on the people. Are they happy? Are they sad? I immerse myself like in 3D or in metaverse inside that experience. And for during those moments, my brain starts to recalibrate and gets the desired oxygen that it needs to have. And from the other control aspect, what I also do and did successfully many times is that I see, oh my God, so I have now 10 extra tasks that were not on my list. So out of my control, I start to feel that kind of rush of burnout and stuff. I need to pause. I go to design because I love to do many things, and design relaxes me. And I open up something and I do a cover or I create something, or just I draw a portrait or whatever, but I shift to something under my control, or I go and wash dishes like Bill Gates, or I do something good to eat, or and this is maybe Carlos's part.
I walk a dog. I go and
Okay.
walk a dog.
Like Angela as well. Yeah. So it's very, very good to switch to something under your control and be there in the present moment. So it's not like I shifted, but then I think, oh, I'm doing this when I should do that. No, it won't work. Even if it's for 5 minutes you approach and you manage to do this, it's a win. Yeah.
So actually, that leads to, I mean, one of the things in terms of managing stress and so forth is kind of mind shifting, right? It's being able to kind of I forget, programmers have a term for it where they can switch from one project to another project, right? I forget what it's called now.
Yeah,
The word
I
is.
associate this with actors. It's like shifting the stage. You don't like the role you are in, shift it. You want to be a superhero, cool. If you want to be a housewife, cool, but shift it in your mind and give direction.
Right. And the idea is that not everyone is able to do mind shifting and move from one kind of way of thinking to another way of thinking. There's a lot of people who like to have more linear kind of engagement and follow through. So if you're unable to shift, and shifting becomes more difficult for someone, because I think it is important, what are some of the tips and techniques that you've been able to use with your clients and in your lives to help you transition out from a negative space to a positive space? So Emily, Angela.
So my go-to for myself and for my clients is to use a technique where you are very much in touch, consciously in touch with your body. And there are probably hundreds, thousands of ways of doing this. So, Carlos, you said you go for a walk. That might work. For others, it might be just being very conscious of their breath in and out, feeling parts of your body, playing music, anything that takes you from a place where you separated your thinking from the rest of your body. As soon as you integrate that, then it suddenly, essentially, this is my picture, is as soon as the body, you're aware of your body, then your thinking mind goes, oh, we can relax and get on with our work. We're not trying to do too many things. We have a foundation on which to think and operate.
Yeah, Christina did that with us, where we were rubbing our fingertips and breathing, and it really, because of the sensation and your brain processing the feeling, closing your eyes and just breathing and feeling, it shifts your senses. So yeah, no, that was good. Emily?
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. Some of the people I'll see in my private practice, individuals who are experiencing burnout, we often get into conversations around establishing better habits for the long term as well. How can we kind of like bring a change to the way that you're working so that you start to be less at risk for this experience as well. And so one of the things I often am encouraging people to do is to pay attention to how much they are task switching when they're working. If you think about somebody who is on the verge of burnout or is just in an extreme state of chronic stress, it's almost as if you're like carrying too many different opportunities in your mind at the same time. And you can find yourself starting to especially if you're doing work that feels urgent, you're trying to address a problem that is urgent in our society, it can feel easy to shift into a psychological state of urgency, which is actually it's not possible to comfortably stay in a psychological state of urgency for very long before it starts negatively impacting how you're feeling. And so I encourage people to start building the habit of noticing when they're task switching and to start practicing single tasking as much as possible, especially if they're already in a stressed out state. So I often run into a lot of resistance with this, especially with moving towards single tasking in the workplace. And so I'll encourage people, okay, let's just start in your personal life then. Don't put a show on while you're folding laundry, and also taking care of your kids. Could we just be taking care of your kids in that moment? Don't do the dishes, clean the kitchen, and make dinner. Could you just make dinner and just be doing that?
How does someone work with just single task? I don't know how that.
Yeah, right. It is. I often get that kind of response. People are like, just one thing at a time. This actually, one of the things that I also like to bring up in the same topic is from Cal Newport's book, the End of Email. Is that what it's called? I believe The End of Email. Does anybody know? No, A World Without Email. It's fantastic. He talks about how email as an asynchronous form of communication. It's just really designed to be this massive disruptive element into our workflow, especially add in Slack or Teams or whatever to that conversation, and you're getting notifications that take you out of the work that you're doing, and encourage you to play responsibility volleyball, where you're just like passing the task back by responding to the email. Like, sure, let's go ahead with it. When do you think we should do it? Send the email back to them, instead of just picking up the phone and having an in the moment conversation and then getting back to focused work and single tasking, and not taxing our brain by trying to carry so many things at the same time.
So I was told of a study that was done a few years ago. I'm not going to suggest you repeat it, but they was clinical trial. They put people into 3 groups, and each was given an intelligence test. So one group was put in a room, go in and do this puzzle. And another group was put in a room, and they were told to do the puzzle. And they were constantly distracted. They were like, could you fix this? Pick up the call, blah, blah, blah. And then there was the third group, which I won't say what it was. So the first group that was quietly worked on this puzzle ranked the highest. The ones that ranked the lowest were the ones that were constantly interrupted by the phone call or the email or whatever. The middle group, that was higher than the lower group, were asked to do the study, but they were stoned at the same time. So multitasking really does degrade your ability to solve problems.
Yeah, I think we could go for the questions, right, Carlos? We have so many cool questions.
I knew that this topic was going to be bigger than 60 minutes, but it's been really great. Thank you. You beat me to it. We're going to start from the top, and I know Danielle asked this question, and I think we've covered quite a few of what the primary triggers are for current state of stress and burnout. So maybe just a quick recap.
If anyone wants to add something to this, because indeed, I would just open up the floor for discussions, to feel safe, to say, hey, I think I am at the verge of breaking up or something, or getting angry, because if we can prevent that, it's much better than create that kind of negativity where you need to handle then the entire team, not just one person. So it is good to prevent, like with any disease.
Yeah, I would also, like, if you're not already doing exit interviews, talk to people when they're quitting. Are they quitting due to stress? Okay, you got a burnout problem. You should, burnout is one of the main reason that people leave work these days. And so if you're looking to retain employees and save the money that turnover costs, well, ask people why they're leaving, and start pursuing one of those risk factors and seeing what needs to change.
One of the things with exit interviews that I've seen a lot of times, it comes from workload, but the workload is due to poor performers and high performers getting the coverage for the low performers. And in the nonprofit association space, I have seen organizations, because of the way they believe, and we were talking a little bit about this before, that they're mission-based, they're about being good and helping people and so forth. And they'll keep staff that are low performers because they hate to fire people, right? In a for-profit environment, that would not cut it. And then you lose good people because of it.
Yeah, totally. And I think taking a few steps back and being like, can we be exceptionally clear about what are the responsibilities that are a part of each position within a team or within an organization? So people feel very clear about how to do a good job and what falls in their court and what is not their responsibility, and when they can say no and say, that's not a part of what I'm supposed to do. It's not in my job description. Accurate, valuable, usable job descriptions are really useful when it comes to managing workload.
So I'll pick the next question, because I always like when we start talking about emotional intelligence. And so Driss had the question about emotional intelligence as an ability to identify negative emotions and how to manage them. Can that help avoid, so how does emotional intelligence play into as an individual and as a leader at an organization in terms of managing the systemic elements that we were talking about?
Oh, this is huge. It's one of my favorite topics because many times I entered in an organization. This was a topic that leaders didn't like to discuss much, and they didn't prioritize. They wanted the tasks done without too much emotional intelligence. But when I created my own studies around organizations where I had an emotionally intelligent leader and another organization where I didn't, I saw two different outcomes when situations appear that could cause burnout. Because the emotionally charged, emotionally intelligent leader will go, come and talk with me at a coffee, next to coffee. What's going on? Tell me. Are you okay? Is your family okay? Let's discuss this. And before losing that employee, because usually you have a time of 3 months that an employee thinks, I will quit. I will go away. And when you onboard someone, you have 60 days, again, to do the same thing, because on day one or during the first week, the employee already knows, I will leave. This was a bad decision. And they are detached already. On the other side, you have with an employee who's already with you 3 months around thinking about leaving. If you feel and you have that kind of sense that, something is wrong, and you prevent that during those 3 months, you keep your employee. And many times those employees are the key employees. And after them, chaos appears. So once you master emotional intelligence, you know when to interfere and you prevent disasters in companies.
Yes. Yeah. Like person-centered leadership is so key to ensuring that people feel satisfied, clear, and recognized for their contributions and the work that they're doing. And that's just bam, 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 3 factors that push people to burnout. If you can show emotional intelligence in your role as a manager, a leader, and just be centered, like, human centered, like this person is a human. They need my compassion, even if that's not why I got into this work. It can be so powerful at preventing burnout.
We have here an interesting nuance. I would love your take on it because I was thinking about how could I answer here, because it's very nuanced and subtle. So isn't burnout the inability to manage our expectations from us and from others? What do you think?
I'm a stickler for definitions when it comes to burnout. So I'm going to say no, not burnout, but it doesn't mean that that's not, I think you could be referring to boundaries for sure. Boundaries between, personal and professional life, or like, having clarity yourself around what you expect for yourself or expected from this role, or something like that. And that can lead to other presentations of chronic stress that look like burnout, but are maybe not officially meeting the definition of burnout. But I'd love to know what Angela has to say.
Well, I was thinking about that, and I thought that was a really good answer, Emily, because I thought, ooh, wow. I think it can be, I think as an individual, yes, there's absolutely the issue of not having the right boundaries. Absolutely. But also there can be an expectation that I should be able to live up to these expectations. I should be able to work 120 hours a week, week in, week out, and keep people alive. And that's kind of extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be even my own expectation as well as the organization's. But my body doesn't believe it anyway. So
your body can't deal with it.
Yeah. So we're not machines. And I think, I absolutely think, I think, Emily, you're spot on that burnout is a very specific definition that's different from lack of resilience, lack of boundaries, all sorts of other things that have their own definition.
And I like that we're keeping. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Angela just sparked something in me that I think is, I just want to emphasize, like when it comes to burnout, that like it's interesting to think of a leader experiencing burnout and where that falls into this conversation. But if we're talking about employees who work for somebody else experiencing burnout, the definition is important because it removes the responsibility from the employee, right? We're not saying it's your fault you're burnt out. We're saying there are organizational structural practices that are pushing you towards burnout right now, and that's what needs to change, or we're going to keep having this problem. We're going to keep losing employees. We're going to keep having to replace people. And so that's why I like to keep burnout as it's defined by the World Health Organization and the International Classification of Diseases as a workplace phenomenon caused by stressors in the workplace that have not been addressed. Because there are very few things like individual experiences that are defined where we're allowed to be like, the responsibility is not on you. It's not your fault you're burnt out. Your own practices may lead to other stress concerns, but not burnout as it's defined.
I love that. And I was looking for the like button and the hearts and everything. So we had another question, and I think this is actually one. Oh, I think I lost it. Oh, man. Oh, no, there it is. We had one from Scott. And I think we addressed this one when we were talking about, some people are not able to shift their mindsets and what were some of the tricks. And so I think we covered it, Scott. If you're good, let us know. But I think we covered that in terms of what we're able to kind of get through.
We have a very good one from Greg about climate that connects us to the summit next week. So let's just put this on because, go ahead, Angela.
Oh, no, I was just going to say to Scott that it is a practice, just like playing tennis and swimming or anything else. Doing that shift takes practice day in, day out.
Same as with my buttons. They didn't work at the beginning, but they started working during the time. But now the most quickest effective way for anything related to stress and burnout when you're just like too far away with your mood is to get into the present moment and get in touch with your body. If it's a visual, if it's a tactile, or if it's an auditive focus you can have, but make it and just focus on that. And during the first seconds, you will feel pain because if you are already too advanced with your stress level, the beginning you will get mad and angry because, this is the last thing I now want. But now persist, pressure yourself to go over the initial 7 seconds and then maybe 20, and then you will start to get the benefits. I think it's not so painful.
So let's talk about Greg's question because VUCA. I mean, I've heard of FOMO, heard of other things, right? And so this one is FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt is one I've heard in the Web3 space. So this is a nice new term for me. How do you deal with unknowns? And don't all jump in at once.
So this is a military term that's been around for probably decades now. That they look out at the world and say it's a VUCA world. So a lot of this requires us to think differently to the way we've been trained. So it does take a discipline to be able to handle ambiguity. It takes a different discipline to think through complexity, which is different from what we learn in business school or engineering school or whatever. That's how to deal in a complicated environment. It requires us to have much higher emotional intelligence because uncertainty is uncomfortable. It's like it's emotionally, physically uncomfortable. So we need practices, and Emily and Christine and I have shown examples. Volatility also requires a discipline of thought on being able to anticipate what does this volatility mean statistically? I mean, all that stuff that you probably learn in stats. So there's no one simple answer, but it does require discipline. Discipline. Different disciplines.
Okay. I know we're coming up on time, but I do want to get one other question in play. And this one's from a viewer on YouTube. So resource allocation work in organizations investing long term. Should it be subsidized by government and taxes? Well, that is a whole big conversation. But I do think that understanding resource allocation at work is important. I actually made a statement somewhere before where I actually said, I think AI, which is causing a lot of people stress, might actually be able to help reduce stress because AI can actually reduce your workload in ways of, like, if you have to write a article, if you have to write different kinds of elements, or you have to spend a lot of time researching something or something like that, you can actually use AI to take care of little things and create efficiency. And I always say that AI can help you with efficiency, not necessarily effectiveness, right? But that efficiency can mitigate some of the stress. I mean, I had an example where my wife was completely stressing out over doing governance for a volunteer group she's part of. We put it through AI. It wrote it all up. We cleaned it up because you got to edit it and clean it. But we were able to do it. She procrastinated on it for 2 weeks, and we did it in an hour using AI, right? And so and it took the stress right off.
I love that. I have something that this is bringing up for me. Again, I'm in Canada. I think funding models for nonprofit in the States go similarly, where funders are specific about where money goes. So speaking to like a nonprofit example, I would love to see funders investing in staff more and recognizing the benefit of having healthy, functional staff, and like to acknowledge that investing in changing from being a burnout prone organization to becoming a burnout proof organization is investing in the organization for the long term. Investing in your staff's well-being is investing in your organization for the long term, because turnover is much more expensive than supporting staff that you already have. And so in terms of like where resource allocation comes from in the nonprofit model, I want to see funders loosen up about where money goes. Many organizations, struggle to get access to general funds to pay their staff, living wage even, but to invest in staff, it's difficult to find funds for that. Everybody wants their money to go to program delivery. I understand why, but it is limiting. And I think it's limiting organizations and their ability to move effectively towards achieving their mission as they want to.
So I think we're at time, and I love this conversation. I'm glad we got to do this conversation. Thank you both for joining us today. It's something that I think is important in understanding that taking care of your staff and is as important as your mission. Everyone talks about in human resources, people management now, I think is what it's called, about the importance of taking care of your staff, taking care of your people, that they're just as important as the revenue you bring in and some of the other elements. And it really is. And without the people who are doing the work, good won't get done. So please take care of your people.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I loved the honesty and the openness. It was really like a fireside chat with a coffee where we gave the best out of our experience. I enjoyed everything I heard. Emily, Angela, thank you for being here with us today. This was absolutely amazing. And now, because we are at the final hour or a couple of minutes more, let's just ask everyone and the viewers to come to our summit next week. So what we want to achieve at the intersection of climate, AI, and humanity, it's to put the right things in order and make decision makers and policymakers take those decisions sooner than later, because we had enough of agreements, we had a lot of talk, but today it's time for consensus and accountable action. We will tackle what we can do to solve the climate SDG with the help of AI and preserving humanity as well. We prepared for you amazing panels with top-notch speakers for every panel in a way that we can tackle this issue from multiple perspectives with different experiences, and then at the end to create a very easily understandable consensus document, because what we need today in the world, it's consensus. And this is our favorite word right now. And moving further, because just based on we are entering in such a world where consensus can make the difference, can create a better future for humanity. And we are here to be an active player to make things happen. So we expect you to come, register to our event on our website, and spread it with all the decision makers and people who you think they care about the future. And we appreciate that, because as much as impact we can create, that will help us all together. So yeah, very happy to be here today and share this topic with such amazing leaders and ladies, because in this field of climate and deciding about climate, people are getting burned out a lot. And during the summit preparation, we got in contact with high officials inside the climate space. And we know from firsthand that they are dealing with backlashes, critiques about things that they are doing for us to save us and create a better future. And this is unfair a little bit, but we understand why good workers, because we had a session today about doing good burnout, why this might happen. And it's time for us to truly engage and help and appreciate those leaders around the world who are doing the right thing for us. They need all the help they can get. They need appreciation, and they need to know that you are next to them. And this is what we are here for, between other things, to be an enabler, a helper for them to make their mission and take their mission to the next level, where we can truly say that we have a future, and a good one. Why not? A beautiful one. And with that said, see you next Tuesday when our summit launches. Very excited.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Stick around for the video. Oh, and